It's actually pretty funny how we treat our own lives like we're smartphones.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right. Like you wake up, you check your internal battery level, and then you just download the latest psychological updates by doom scrolling through the news in bed.
Yeah, the warning routine of panic.
Exactly. And then you just boot up and run your pre-programmed apps all day. Hustle, perform, achieve, panic, repeat. It's binary, and it's exhausting.
And if you drop below 20% battery, you don't actually stop to recharge.
No, of course not. You just, find an espresso shot to plug into so you can keep the screen bright. But that invisible, frantic code we're all running, that's exactly what an underground, self-published author named Berns Pen is trying to teach us how to hack.
Yeah, he really is.
So today, we are immersing ourselves in his catalog for this deep dive to deconstruct his recurring themes of belief, systemic control, and human resilience.
It goes far beyond just basic self-help or, life hacks. When you actually analyze his body of work as a literary critic, you realize he is writing across this massive spectrum, like speculative fiction, deeply philosophical nonfiction, personal growth. But there is a very distinct surgical thread connecting all of it. He is systematically dissecting the operating systems of modern life.
Right, and the mission for today's deep dive is to extract the most actionable pieces of that philosophy. Because whether you're a young professional trying to figure out why your cutthroat corporate ladder feels so hollow, or maybe a student paralyzed by modern moral dilemmas, Berns Pen offers a genuinely provocative toolkit.
He really gives you a new way to see things.
He does. We're going to use his work to help you navigate the digital age and completely transform how you view strength, faith, and, well, your own mind. So, okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the sheer crushing weight of modern life, let's look at his nonfiction guide, Decoding Jesus Once More.
So Decoding Jesus Once More functions almost as a 25-chapter triage manual, specifically for people who are drowning in what Penn identifies as the noise of the digital age.
The noise, the capital N, right?
Exactly. But we have to understand what he actually means by noise. It is not just the literal volume of notifications on your phone.
Right. It's bigger than that.
Much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
The noise is the cultural baseline we've just accepted. It is the exhausting, winner-takes-all hustle culture that demands you constantly optimize every waking second of your existence.
Oh, man, the pressure to turn your hobbies into side hustles and your side hustles into empires.
Yeah, it's a commodification of the self. What Penn argues is that we are constantly searching for a pure signal within this deafening static. And to counter this algorithm of endless productivity, he introduces a framework he calls the strength of softness.
The strength of softness.
Right. He returns to ancient wisdom, framing it as the master's craft to illustrate how you can stop merely surviving the chaos and start mastering the art of being human.
Okay, I have to push back hard on this, though, because let's ground this in reality. Imagine it is 4:55 p.m. on a Friday.
Oh, the classic nightmare scenario.
Right. Your boss walks over and drops a 50-page slide deck on your desk that needs to be completely overhauled by Monday morning. If I tell my CEO, actually, I am practicing the strength of softness right now. I'm returning to ancient wisdom. I am getting fired before I can even pack up my desk.
Yeah, that wouldn't go over well.
In a cutthroat corporate environment, wouldn't practicing softness just make you a massive target? Like, how is this not just a recipe for unemployment?
What's fascinating here is how fundamentally Penn redefines that word. Softness in his framework is not passivity. It's not being a doormat. And it certainly isn't whispering spiritual quotes to a toxic boss.
Okay, so what is it practically?
He frames it as a deliberate, highly tactical withdrawal from systemic control. Think about it through the lens of Aikido or, advanced martial arts.
Okay, I'm with you.
If a much larger opponent charges at you with rigid, aggressive force, planting your feet and bracing for impact, being hard, that just guarantees your bones get broken.
Right, you just absorb all their kinetic energy.
Exactly, you absorb all the damage. The tactical move, the strength of softness, is yielding just enough to let their own rigid momentum throw them off balance while you remain grounded.
Oh, wow, okay.
So in that Friday afternoon scenario, the hard response is to instantly panic, absorb your boss's manufactured anxiety, and sacrifice your weekend with a bleeding ulcer.
Been there.
Right. The soft response is an internal boundary. It's the ability to look at the request, diffuse the emotional terror the system wants you to feel, and respond from a place of clarity. You might still have to do the work, or You might negotiate the deadline, but you are no longer running the boss's panic algorithm. You're running your own.
So it's about protecting the internal operating system from external malware.
That's a great way to put it. And in another of his titles, The Chill Principle, he expands on the mechanics of this by focusing on sustainable success.
Right, because the hustle isn't sustainable.
Not at all. If you are constantly rigid, constantly matching the hysteria of the hustle algorithm, the friction will eventually burn out your motherboard. The system will grind you down because it is designed to extract, not to nurture.
That is painfully true.
So the strength of softness is the actionable ability to step outside that algorithmic hustle, protect your time, and, recalibrate your soul so you can respond to challenges strategically rather than reactively.
But here's the thing about that tactical withdrawal. You can't really pull it off if you're terrified of looking weak. Like, to step out of the hustle requires taking off the armor you've been wearing to survive it.
Yes, exactly.
Which brings us perfectly to the internal psychological walls we build.
Yeah.
Let's shift from the external workplace to the internal programming, specifically looking at his book Beyond the Warrior, The Evolution of Masculinity.
This is where Penn shifts from cultural observation to a deeply analytical critique of our social conditioning. In Beyond the Warrior, he targets the traditional warrior script. We all know the components of this script, right? Be silent, be stoic, conquer the room, never show pain, and above all, never ask for help.
The classic brooding lone wolf mentality that we just glorify in every action movie and business biography.
Precisely. But Penn asserts that while this script might have served a valid evolutionary purpose for surviving immediate physical threats centuries ago, in the modern 21st century workplace or family unit, it has mutated into a restrictive cage.
So it's outdated software.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The lone wolf isn't actually strong. The lone wolf is isolated, perpetually exhausted, and fundamentally incapable of integration.
He introduces a concept called the father wound in this context, right? Can you explain the actual psychological mechanics behind that? Like, why the father wound?
The father in this psychological framework represents the archetype of conditional validation. Basically, the first authority figure you had to appease to survive.
Okay, I see.
When we are children, our literal survival depends on the approval of the giant beings around us. The wound occurs when we learn that love or safety is only granted when we perform, when we achieve, or when we hide our flaws. We internalize that dynamic.
Oh, wow. So we take that childhood survival code and we project the father onto everything else as adults.
Everything. We project it onto the CEO, onto venture capitalists, onto the social media algorithm.
That's terrifying.
It is. When your boss sighs in a meeting, your nervous system doesn't register a minor professional annoyance. It registers an existential threat because your father wound is screaming that you are about to be abandoned by the tribe for not being perfect.
So how do we fix it?
To heal this, Penn argues, you have to consciously uncouple your self-worth from external validation. You must move away from the lone wolf persona, which is really just a terrified child wearing a suit of armor, and move toward authentic connection.
So the very armor you built to survive your early career, the stoic mask you wore to get the promotion, is exactly what's suffocating you now. It's keeping you stuck.
Yes, it becomes a liability.
But wait. If we are throwing out the warrior script, does this mean Penn wants us to abandon stoicism entirely? Because honestly, if the Q3 numbers tank and everyone in the boardroom is screaming, keeping a cool, stoic head seems like a pretty vital leadership skill.
That's a really important question, and he makes a crucial, nuanced distinction here. Penn does not advocate for emotional fragility or, bleeding heart oversharing.
Okay, good.
He advocates for what he terms stoic mastery. And the mechanical difference is profound. The traditional warrior script relies on emotional suppression. True stoic mastery is about emotional management.
Okay, let's break that down. Suppressing it just means shoving the terror into a psychological pressure cooker until you eventually, explode at a barista or have a midlife crisis.
Yes, exactly that. In your boardroom scenario, where the Q3 numbers tank, the leader who suppresses their emotion feels the sheer terror, shows it down, and immediately starts barking orders, assigning blame, and operating from a place of aggressive, rigid control.
Just to soothe their own hidden panic.
Right. That is what he calls the fixer mentality. Penn urges readers to transition from being a fixer to being a modern elder.
The modern elder. I like that. How does the elder handle the tanking Q3 numbers?
The modern elder feels the exact same terror as the fixer, but they manage it. They acknowledge the fear internally, understand where it is coming from, and purposefully choose not to project it onto the room.
So what do they actually do?
They might say, this is a massive hit. It is deeply concerning. Take a breath. Now, what is our next logical step? Penn specifically frames this type of vulnerability, the willingness to be human but grounded, not as a liability, but as the ultimate tactical advantage in business.
Wow.
Yeah, the leader who leads through integration and presence builds unbreakable team loyalty, whereas the fixer just breeds a culture of hidden fear.
It's incredible how he takes these abstract psychological theories and maps them directly onto our daily grind. But I want to explore how far this goes, because he takes this exact same framework of dismantling rigid emotional armor and applies it to ideological armor. Let's look at his approach to religion and philosophy in The Anatomy of Faith.
This is arguably one of his most ambitious nonfiction works. In The Anatomy of Faith, Penn actively deconstructs the way modern society treats belief. Usually we treat faith or philosophical belief as static, concrete doctrine.
Like a checklist.
Exactly, a list of rigid rules that you either perfectly adhere to or you fail entirely. Penn rejects that. He insists that belief must be treated as a living body.
Like a biological organism.
Yes. Over the course of the book, he actually maps out the biological systems of this organism. He devotes chapters to the pulse of trust, the breath of hope, the wounds of doubt, and the healing of resilience.
That's a beautiful way to frame it.
It is. He is integrating developmental psychology with philosophy to prove that healthy faith is inherently dynamic. It requires mindfulness, it requires engaging with mystery, and it requires community to survive.
It's like we normally treat belief as a concrete fortress. You build the walls high, you arm the guards, and if one single stone of doubt falls out of the wall, the entire fortress is compromised and you have to panic. But Penn is saying belief is a garden.
I think we can build on that analogy, actually. If a stone falls out of a fortress, it's a structural failure. But in a garden, things are supposed to die.
Right. A garden naturally experiences seasons of drought. A branch might rot and need to be pruned. The soil has to be turned over. And that isn't a failure of the garden. That's just the biological requirement for the next season of massive growth.
That captures his thesis perfectly. And it is a radically forgiving framework for anyone dealing with ideological burnout.
So how do we actually apply this? Say you have a young professional, maybe a third-year law student, who wakes up one morning and realizes their chosen career path feels completely devoid of meaning. They are experiencing deep, profound doubt about their purpose.
Under a rigid doctrine, whether that's religious dogma or the capitalist doctrine that says you must always be climbing the ladder, that law students' doubt is a malfunction. The system tells them they are failing.
Right, they're defective.
But through Penn's philosophy, the wounds of doubt are just part of the living anatomy of belief. Doubt is not a disease. It is the necessary catalyst for mindfulness. It's the pruning of the garden.
That's so relieving.
It is. It gives that student permission to step back, breathe, and realize that their purpose hasn't been destroyed. It is just evolving into its next form. It removes the crushing pressure of absolute certainty.
Which is such a massive relief. I mean, we demand so much certainty from ourselves in an age where everything is shifting under our feet. So, okay, we've looked at his direct philosophical toolkits. We have the strength of softness, the transition from lone wolf to modern elder, and the anatomy of faith as a living body.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. How does an author translate these incredibly dense themes into speculative fiction? Because Berns Pen isn't just writing self-help. He writes expansive dystopian sci-fi.
He does, and putting on my literary critic hat, his fictional universe is where his ideas truly catch fire. He blends rich psychological symbolism with gritty realism, and then he traps his characters inside terrifyingly rigid, inescapable structures.
Which books specifically do this?
If you examine his speculative sci-fi novels like The Soul Lock, 13th Generation, and El Pasado, you see him taking the themes we just discussed and projecting them onto a massive societal canvas.
Give me an example of the mechanics in these plots. Like, what kind of rigid structures are we talking about?
Take El Pasado. In this world, ordinary individuals are trapped inside extraordinary moral dilemmas dictated by massive systemic power structures that actually track and enforce historical behavior. The characters are literally bound by the sins and decisions of the past.
Wow. So it's an exaggerated dystopian version of a credit score or a social media algorithm that locks you into a demographic box and never lets you grow beyond your past clicks.
Yes, it is the ultimate manifestation of the algorithmic hustle, turned into a literal totalitarian regime.
Yeah.
The protagonist isn't just fighting a standard sci-fi villain, they're fighting an inherited operating system.
That's fascinating.
And Penn uses his characters to embody the philosophical conflicts we discussed. Look at his literary novel Café Burgos. The narrative follows Natalia, a young neurosurgeon. Pen uses her perspective to dissect the fragments of human connection by pitting two archetypes against each other. The algorithmic man versus the dreamer.
The algorithmic man versus the dreamer. That is a direct fictional mirror to the noise of the digital age versus the strength of softness.
It is. But because it's fiction, he absolutely refuses to offer easy, prepackaged answers. The human connection Natalia experiences is messy, contradictory, and incomplete.
He doesn't wrap it up in a neat bow.
No, Penn doesn't write fiction to preach. He writes it to disorient the reader. He wants to challenge your assumptions about identity, morality, and force you to question how much of your daily behavior is actually your own conscious choice versus what the system has shaped you to do.
And what really blows my mind is how he has chosen to distribute these ideas. We are talking about incredibly deep, multi-layered philosophical literature, but Berns Pen is a completely independent, self-published author. He bypassed the traditional Big Five publishers entirely.
He did?
And he has deliberately chosen a $6.99 ebook pricing model across his catalog.
Right, and that pricing model is not just a marketing detail. It is an ideological statement. Traditional publishing often locks deep philosophical or literary thought behind $30 hardcovers aimed at a very specific elite demographic.
It goes further than that, actually. It's a grassroots effort to democratize literature. He's literally stepping outside the systemic control of the publishing industry's algorithm to distribute his ideas directly to the readers.
That's a great point.
But I have to ask you as a critic, why hide these actionable life lessons inside speculative sci-fi in the first place? Does placing a character in a dystopian system actually make it easier for me, the reader, to recognize the systems controlling my own real-world behavior?
Oh, it is perhaps the most effective Trojan horse in literary history. When you read a nonfiction self-help book, your psychological defenses are fully armed. You feel judged.
Sure, you're looking for flaws.
Exactly. You read a chapter on the father wound and your brain instantly throws up walls of denial. But fiction completely bypasses those defenses. When you are watching Natalia struggle in Café Burgos or watching a protagonist fight the historical tracking in El Pasado, you simply empathize with them. You feel their exhaustion. You feel their frustration at being boxed in.
And then the trap springs.
Yes. Slowly, the realization creeps in. You realize that the dystopian, inescapable control they are fighting in the novel isn't fundamentally different from the corporate ladder, the social media algorithms, or the restrictive expectations you are fighting in your own life.
You think you're just reading a cool sci-fi thriller about the 13th generation in the Solog, and suddenly you're sitting in a boardroom questioning why you are suppressing your emotions to appease a boss who doesn't care about you.
Exactly. It forces you to become an active participant in the philosophy, rather than just passively consuming advice. It demands critical thinking. It holds up a mirror to the reader and asks, are you the dreamer, or have you become the algorithmic man?
Man, that's powerful. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's synthesize this massive deep dive. Berns Pen's entire catalog, across his grounded nonfiction and his expansive sci-fi universes, is ultimately an invitation.
An invitation to wake up.
Right. It's an invitation to recognize the malware you've downloaded from society. It's a challenge to trade the heavy, isolating armor of the lone wolf for the strategic, grounded advantage of the modern elder. It's a call to find the tactical strength of softness, to yield and step outside the exhausting, winner-takes-all hustle of the loud, digital world.
Well said.
And perhaps most beautifully, it's a permission slip to let your beliefs, your purpose, and your faith breathe and evolve like a living, growing organism in a garden, rather than defending them like a paranoid guard in a concrete fortress.
And if we take everything we've unpacked today and push it to its absolute logical conclusion, it leaves us with an entirely new, rather unsettling dilemma to consider.
Oh, what's that?
We've talked extensively about how to jailbreak your own life, how to heal the father wound, and how to step out of the algorithmic hustle. But if we all actually succeed, what happens next?